It's been so long in Adrienette Fanfiction, part 34. Happy late New Year's, Julica said, sliding into the seat in front of Adrien. Hi, happy late New Year's as well to you, Adrien smiled. How was Christmas for you? He asked. Julica sighed and brushed a piece of her hair back. Not bad, but not great, honestly, she admitted. Luca was in his room most of break, as per usual, and Mom was as wild as ever. I love my family, really, but sometimes I just wish that we were all a little bit more sane, she joked. Adrien laughed with her for a bit. I think you sucked all the normalcy out of them, Adrien teased her. Julica huffed out a laugh and began to trace patterns onto the table. What about you? How was your break? She asked. Adrien smiled, thinking of his first real Christmas with his father for the first time in years. He had missed making snow angels with his mother still, but it was nice to have his father back too. Pretty good, Adrien said. Father and I exchanged gifts. He got more sheet music and fencing gear, but it was all really nice. He fiddled with the fingers in his lap. I'm still getting used to it, though, having my father back in my life. Sometimes I had to retreat into my room because it was just so strange to see him for an hour during dinner, he admitted quietly. Julica looked at him with an understanding look. I would guess it's something like that. I guess we both are the type of people who disappear when we get overwhelmed, she laughed. Adrien nodded in agreement. Oh, Adrien knew he was that type of person. He didn't want to think of himself as a runaway coward or anything, but sometimes he'd just run far into Paris when he felt like his thoughts were just too loud. He'd run away from that building a year or two ago, that night that he had finally confessed to Ladybug that he was in love with her. He had run to Marinette, actually, and now it was sort of ironic. Adrien wasn't as talkative or social as Marinette was. He tended to stay in his own circle of friends, talking only when spoken to. That's probably why he enjoyed talking to Julica so much. They were very similar people. Only she wasn't a leather-clad feline-themed superhero of their city during the nighttime. But that was okay with him. He sometimes couldn't keep track of who was a superhero and who hadn't been. Our family really does shape us, huh? In ways that I don't think anyone would expect, Julica said in a faraway voice. I know that's why I'm so quiet. My mom is so chaotic sometimes. I feel like I'm the mother of the household. She sighed. Adrien nodded silently. He'd only met Julica's mother a handful of times, and each one he grew more and more surprised that Julica was her daughter. They both had the affinity for music and had the same laugh, but albeit Julica was more quiet. In general, her mom was explosive and loud, while Julica was calmer and shy. I kind of get that, Adrien said kindly. Not totally. I had, Grilla and Natalie, but they always felt like caretakers, so I was kind of just free floating around for a while, Adrien admitted. Yeah, I mean, my mom took care of me and Luca, of course. She was there, but I don't think I ever really felt like a normal kid. Sometimes Rose or even Marinette would talk about a game they played as a kid, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? I know I didn't grow up normal, but it's shocking how different my childhood was from everyone else, Julica admitted. Adrien really did agree with her. I always felt like I'd be more talkative if I didn't grow up the way I did. Not that I'm resentful or anything, it took so long for me to realize some social cues. I just stayed quiet most of the time. I'd probably make a few more friends if I wasn't so stunted behind, I think, he said with a slight chuckle. After all, growing up, his only two friends were Chloe and his cousin, and Chloe and Felix had grown a bit cold throughout the years. Even though he was close to them, It did affect him drastically, only having 2 friends around his actual age. After all, for the first 13 years of his life, his parents, Gorilla, Natalie, and the photographer were the most prominent figures in his life. He only worked and practiced before going to real school. I kind of feel that way too, Julika said. Oddly enough, I try to avoid chaos and crazy stuff during the school day. I always have. She sighed and looked off into the distance. My mom is wild. That's no surprise or secret. But what most people don't know is how much she needs to be chaotic and all over the place. She needs some madness and messiness. It's fine, really, but it can be a bit much at times, especially when you're growing up. She's like the Mad Hatter from Alice in the Wonderland. I'm Alice, falling down a well into... What on earth is this place, and why is this lady so messed up in the head? Julika laughed a bit. Adrien wondered if it was okay that he found that funny. Perhaps that was a form of dark humor. Hyperbole, of course, Julika added quickly, no doubt sensing his discomfort. Adrien nodded in understanding. Sorry, she said. A bit of darker humor than what you're used to, I'm guessing? I use humor sometimes to get at how I actually feel about things. It makes things easier to say. At least to me. Pretty good coping mechanism if you ask me. So long as it's not the only one. She eyed him with a raised eyebrow. Adrien hummed. Maybe he should try it then. There was a lot he wanted to say, but just didn't feel like it was socially acceptable to say. I mean, he took in a comforting breath. You have a Mad Hatter. You have the Mad Hatter for a mother, and I had a chess piece with no emotion for Dad. It felt strange, but also relieving for him to say that. It had been in the back of his head for so long. Exactly. Julika laughed loudly. Wild child mom and runaway dad, she sighed. Adrien didn't say anything, but smiled a little. He knew that Julika's father wasn't really in the picture, but he didn't realize or think that perhaps he'd left by choice. Then again, he was guessing it all in his head. Julika gave him a wry smile. Oh, yeah, I forgot you haven't been here for very long. My father left the house when I was around 11-ish, I think. He and my mother planned everything together, so when he left, so did organization. I mean, she's always been a fan of chaos anyways. It's not like she's doing it all just to spite him, but in some way, it's a way for her to prove to him that she's doing great on her own. And she is. I guess that's why I stay so quiet, she said. She sighed with an undercurrent of sadness or resentment in it. A lot of my dreams and ones feel unattainable. I don't want a lot of close people in my life because that's more people that could leave. I'm scared to actually be a model because what if they turn away from me too, she said. Adrien frowned deeply. Julika was a wonderful person, and she was quickly becoming a close friend to him. She shouldn't feel that way. He looked at her and smiled. And thank you for letting me in, he said. She smiled back at him and tucked some hair behind her ear. You get it, she sighed. If you ever want to give modeling another try, send me a text. You did really great last time, he told her. Her smile seemed a bit brighter, and he was happy to see it grow. Maybe I will, Julika said with a slightly faraway voice. Thanks, she said. No problem. Plagg almost gagged. Adrien was being all emotional and vulnerable. It was awful. But then again, he had been finally thinking and talking about things that he really needed to think and talk about. So Plagg wasn't totally and completely disgusted. He had been doing a lot of thinking himself, and well, Plagg, he didn't know what to think of Gabriel's new actions. The kid himself was overjoyed, that was for sure. And he really didn't want to bring up how suspicious his father was being and then have Adrien be totally crushed. But at the same time, Plagg had a weird feeling that they could never fully trust his father, blood or not. His intentions never seemed all that clear, and the sudden change was just that. So sudden, Plagg was unsure, and for no reason. Adrien may be a naive kitten, but Plagg was not. He noted the sketchy behavior, the same way he noted Natalie's weird affection towards Adrien's father. Though he often pushed the thought out of him out of convenience sake. Plagg was really thinking that now was an okay time to start questioning the people around him. He could only hope that Adrien would grow the tact to do so himself. Plagg sighed, though he really tried to keep it quiet from inside the bag. Adrien was a good kid. He really didn't want anything truly bad to happen to him just yet, and just for the sake of learning who to trust and who not to. He had enough trauma for a 16-year-old boy. Truly, the kid did not need more. Plagg decided that he should watch out for anyone with malintentions. Just silently, Adrien trusted him. It would work. The kid would learn as he gets older. For now, Plagg knew he just needed to watch out for him, and demand more cheese, of course, as payment. Wow, I've never heard of this band. Really? Huh. I'll send you my playlist if you'd like me to. Yes, please. Apparently, this new friend, Julika, had decent taste in music, and Adrien was just learning it now. Plagg approved of the song. He would not complain if Adrien was to blast it in his room like a true angsty teenager with mild parental problems. Though he honestly doubted that Adrien would do that. Oh, I got B, Plagg heard Adrien whisper. Marinette chatted back her answers. Plagg smirked from his hiding spot. He could see them quite clearly, and saw that Marinette was slowly but surely leaning towards Adrien. He knew that the blonde had no concept of spatial or social awareness, but eventually Adrien would notice and start blushing as hard as a fire truck. Adrien still hadn't picked up on the fact that Marinette liked him back, currently, and often wondered what it would take for him to figure it out. A billboard? A date? A kiss? Would any of those be obvious enough? Plagg truly had no real guess. Alright, class, before you leave for the weekend, I want to announce to all of you about the winter dance on the 14th. Get ready to ask your dates, the teacher announced. Mutters and cries rang through the room, and Plagg massaged his head with a groan. He saw Adrien sneak his eyes to the black-haired girl sitting next to him, and Plagg knew that he was in for a ride. An awful one. The two brunettes beside them shared a mischievous smirk. Adrien was definitely going to ask Marinette to the dance. Not that he didn't like the plan or anything, it was just more so... Plagg knew there'd be too much fretting before the task was to actually happen. Plagg sighed in a long-suffering way. He was going to be stuck with a lovesick fool for the next 2 weeks, and there was no way in heck he had enough cheese to deal with it.